IVM.
Hello one, hello all. Welcome to the Diary of the Traveling Professor. And I'm Siddharth Deshmukh, your friendly neighborhood traveling professor, talking on this Thursday with a very strange set of observations that I must share with you. Well, I have to give you the background for this set of observations. What I must say is that I nowadays, for the past couple of months, have been sitting in a room in London, where I live, obviously, and have been teaching across places, whether it's in Mumbai or Ahmedabad or Pune or wherever it may be, right? I've been talking to various sets of students who are all, learning in a different way. They're not in a classroom, obviously. They're in the comfort or discomfort of their own homes, and they're trying to make the most of the situation as, is the professor. In this case, that's me. So I just found it really interesting to actually turn the tables on this one when I noticed how my kids learn. Yeah, my kids, one of them has just gotten into university and the second one is studying for a fairly important year in her GCSEs. And I saw how they're learning. Now, this is not a diary entry to out them, but I noticed that it was quite an interesting experience just to observe them. What I did was that I didn't sneak up on them or anything, but I did kind of, see them when the professor was teaching my elder one, who's in university. And he was talking something really interesting, and she was kind of diligently taking notes. Seriously, no, I'm not joking. She was diligently taking notes and she was underlining stuff, and she was, paying a lot of attention to the professor. She was also lying on the bed and pretty much looking as if she's lazing about if I didn't pay too much attention to her. So yeah, she was with her laptop, lying in her bed, lazing about, but also taking down her notes. So that made me wonder. I went to the adjacent room and saw her younger sister learn, and I saw a similar scene. Now, this was a very interesting situation for me to see the other side, because professors have no idea how students are actually, well, they do, but it's all in the imagination. I saw it happen in my own home. And then I saw both of these kids, learning. So they were quite serious about their learning. It wasn't as if they were goofing off or anything. But they were doing it in a manner which is so-called highly inappropriate if they were in class. That set me thinking, and it set me thinking in a variety of ways, but I just wanted to kind of let you know how I went through this whole thought process. The first thing I realized is that a lot of my students obviously must be doing this. They must be lying about, lounging about, listening to me or any other professor while they are literally kind of prostrate on bed or, just doing various ungodly things, but listening to the lecture. But if I just, and I'm not a normal professor in that sense, but I can actually sense a lot of normal professors, normal in quotes, getting pretty upset with this sort of disrespect from students. And I think the exact opposite. I actually think that perhaps classrooms are missing out on a trick because they do not encourage students to be relaxed enough. Because what I did notice was that, the note-taking was happening. The learning was happening because my elder one actually talked to me about what she learned. And trust me, she's not like a scholar student. She's sincere, but she's not somebody who would normally do that. So she was paying enough attention in class to actually talk through what she learned outside. And I was quite amazed about how well she'd grasped the concept that the professor had taught. Yes, of course, the professor was good, but it was quite interesting to see that the more relaxed she was, the more focused she was. The more relaxed she was, the more focused she was. And it made me wonder whether Zoom classes actually have some hidden benefits. Now, the non-benefits, we all know. Clearly, the peer driven learning or the peer driven experiences or just the feel of being in a classroom and actually understanding the professor's body language along with what he or she is actually stating does add to a learning experience, to a teaching experience as well. And of course, you get natural breaks that you typically will not get in a Zoom class. And a lot of professors are not particularly, let's say, adept at giving breaks because it kind of breaks off their thought process, right? So it becomes damn difficult for a professor to stop in the middle of a lecture and say, okay, now here's a 5-minute break and come back and the rest of it. And I'm sure that you understand, if you're not either a student or a professor, that managing and organizing something like this can become a nightmare. But having talked of all these disadvantages, what I did want to speak about was the advantages. And it is really interesting to see this specific advantage come into being because of Zoom classes. I have noticed that because of no distractions or less distractions, and because of, an ability to be potentially much more relaxed. And I'm not saying that's true across all classrooms, and I'm not saying it's true across all students even. And some of them certainly have a tough time managing things in a smaller house, maybe than what my lucky children are privileged to be in. But if you are lucky enough and privileged enough to actually be in a quiet sort of place when you're learning through Zoom, there's an unbelievable advantage that does come to the fore, and that is the advantage of being relaxed enough to learn at a new level. And then I realized, kind of extrapolated this observation of mine, and I realized that a lot of my learning actually happens when I am pretty chilled out and listening to a YouTube video or listening to a favorite podcast of mine rather than being absolutely ramrod straight and upright. Now, I'm sure that this is different for different people. Some people would want a different posture and a different way of learning. But I suspect that a lot of students who perhaps were not being able to focus or concentrate in class because of the restrictions that did not allow them to be as chilled out, in quotes, as possible, are suddenly waking up and enjoying themselves and enjoying the learning on Zoom. It's quite possible that we might lose out on this learning once we go back into the real world. Of course, we have to get back to the real world. All the students have paid such hefty fees to be there, and obviously the professors would prefer it too. But in the meanwhile, can we not appreciate this one benefit of learning a few new concepts in a brilliant, relaxed fashion? Well, I hope you like this diary entry of mine, and perhaps you can use this diary entry of mine as a thought to perhaps, increase your learning over the weekend whenever you listen to something. Yeah. I encourage you to do that. Get back to me and tell me how it went for you. And if you like diary entries like this, well, podcasts like this, there's many more on ivmpodcast.com, or just download the app. And I'm there on Instagram and LinkedIn. Do connect with me over there, and I'll be happy to carry the conversation forward. Until next time then, see you soon.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I want to let you all know about 2 new shows that we've launched this week. The first one is Millennial Athletes, hosted by Tanvi and Shlok. Both of them are, they spent their life playing badminton, and they know a lot of athletes, and they want to talk about the particular challenges that athletes face. Really, really great conversations. Do definitely check that out. The other show that I wanted to mention to you that we launched this week is Naan Curry. Naan Curry is a show about it's about food and the history of food and the economics around food and its consumption and all that kind of stuff. It's a really, really interesting conversation. It's hosted by Sadaf, the Untitled Chapter and former MasterChef India finalist, and Archit, who is a researcher who writes on behavioral science and economics. Definitely worth checking out. Besides that, we had a great week as always, right? Great stuff on all the normal shows. Do check those out. But with that, hope to see you again next week.
Namaskar, dear Bandhu. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. These are truly challenging times, and in these times, we need hope. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on IVM Podcasts, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, there is hope because there's one life and we are alive.